Hi, Claudia. Hopefully, we're not going to have any connection issues now. Do you know what I think it is? I had my, I've got a remote weather station that's digital and it's got a Wi-Fi signal, and it was very close to the camera. I think that's what the connection issues were. So hopefully we're going to be fine now, because I've just disassembled my my remote weather stations. We should be good, and hopefully Maria will join us in a moment. So how are you, Claudia?
Very good, thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, very well.
Yeah, you're slightly quiet, but I'm just going to ping Claudia, not Claudia, Maria, another invitation. Maria, yeah, Maria, another invitation, just in case she didn't get the one that I just sent her, because I can see she's online. I think she's got to disconnect from another call. I'll just send her one more, and then we will be good to go. Sorry about the connection issues, everyone watching. It's been a bit glitchy today. I had another session on here earlier today, and that was a bit glitchy. I'm putting it down to random gremlin issues with Instagram. So where are you in the world today, Claudia? Are you in Innsbruck, or are you in London?
No, I'm in London. I'm in London.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Excellent. And are you, because you're there for the Bartlett, are you there working on that, or are you in town for Ecologic Studio work?
Well, we are working quite a lot with Ecologic. Maria also joined us recently in some project. Maria just telling me that she has a connection problem herself at the moment. So we have quite a lot of new projects. We actually have... Welcome to join. And that will showcase some of the latest research on the next step, let's say, of the photosynthetica. So from an architecture that captures the air, remetabolize it, to an architecture that produce biomass and new material. So at the moment we are working on a new biodegradable polymer from the biomass produced by the microalgae in shades of color, depending from the microalgae that are used. And with this, we will showcase a set of products that we are developing with the GSK at the Building Center on the 15th of June. And then we're working with Hyundai on a large project that will be showcased in Busan soon, in which we have one of the 3 projects showcased there as part of the Hyundai Motor Studio will be a larger scale biological printing. So it's a 10-meter tall structure, 5-meter wide, that is being printed completely with biodegradable polymer harvested from the microalgae cultivated in our project. So that will, on one side, allow us to close the loop. On the other side, will allow us to also develop new morphology testing and technique.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, it sounds, I'm just going to, Maria, I can see that you're tuning in. We're having a connection issue. So what I'm going to do is send you another invitation in a minute or two, because I'm not quite sure what the issue is, but we will get over it. So don't worry. Oh, wait a minute. I might be able to get you in this way. Will that work? I've just accepted another route of invitation from Maria, so hopefully she's going to pop in a minute. But when you were speaking there, the scale of bioprinting that you're working on for that project is really impressive. I mean, that's really quite some size.
Yeah, we are actually working on multiple scale. On one scale, we are working on new products that relate directly to human health. On the other end, we are working on larger scale structure in terms of biological printing and trying to understand how these could be eventually scaled up. So it is an exciting time, both academically that with the practice, and yeah.
Fantastic, brilliant. I'm just going to send her one more invitation. And I know that a lot of the people that will be tuning in will know about your past work. Oh, hello, Maria. got there. We got there.
Hello.
So many glitches to navigate.
Appearance and disappearance today.
Well,
we managed now. We're three.
We were talking about migratory nature, and you know, it's only apt that, you know, you had to disappear for a while and then come back, because it's completely in line with what we were talking about. So brilliant. So throughout this series, as I said when we started the call with Maria, it was with you two and Rachel Armstrong that we had our very first BioFutures conversation via live stream. That was on Clubhouse, and then obviously we migrated it over and we started this series with you. So we are concluding with you ladies, and I know that Maria has definitely seen a few as we've gone along. And there are a number of key themes that have come up throughout the series. We've actually had 10 sessions in this first series. That, you know, there have been a number of topics and ideas and challenges that have emerged from those various discussions. And so I thought I'm going to ask you a couple of the questions I'm going to ask you are really drawing out from some of those findings, from some of what our peers are saying, to see if they are syncing with, you know, with your experiences and what you have found too. But I thought maybe the sort of first thing, I'm not sure if everyone watching will know just how exciting some of the projects that you work on and with are. You both of you have been working in the general field of biomaterials, biocomputing, biodesign, eco. Obviously, when I speak to bio, I'm speaking to eco, and I'm speaking to planetary more generally. You've been working with this for a long time. You've been working with a number of different institutions. What is it that you really find to be very most exciting about being in this space right now? You know, what is it that you really feel to be some of the sort of biggest shifts that this could enable?
Well, there are bigger societal and political shifts that this could enable, mainly in time of climate change and how design can contribute. But what I find most exciting is that finally, after 20 years, somebody cares. So yeah, now Maria is going to give the more beautiful and philosophical answer. I give the old lady grumpy one. But yeah, so it's actually what is good of this period is that after a lot of here really working on this subject and trying to discuss how design and aesthetic can contribute to ecology, and always struggling with this dichotomy, I think lately some people or few people are on one side started to take notice, and on the other side also recognizing the relevance that design can play in this field, really in being able to reconnect a wider audience, or as we call it, a collective intelligence, but really in a more actualized way. So this is great. There are still a lot of challenges, especially related to the fact that our society, the infrastructure that we inherited from modernity, has an inherited, you know, intrinsic linear metabolism. So that you cannot just scrap everything and start from scratch. So you need to work with the detail to try to understand how we evolve a city which is linear in metabolism to one that is more systemic. And from the legal point of view, the ecological point of view, the economical point of view, so there are multiple levels. But in the latest year, we really feel that this work has reached a wider audience, not simply an academic elite, and there are things happening that allow a higher degree of actualization. So that is positive.
Brilliant. And you, Maria?
Yeah, well, about being heard, I was saying that every time to Claudia and Marco, that the thing that during how many years, especially Claudia and Marco, were building up this path. So I think now it definitely works because there is a lot of work built on that, and yeah, the audience has also grown up a bit now and listening and following up. But I think it's fundamental also that design and architecture, we are basically building up also, as we were maybe talking with you, Melissa, before, culture now. So basically by building the city, or we call it the urban sphere, no, we are also affecting the cultural aspects and the relation between people or between human and non-human. So this is very important. The type of culture that we are, the type of living, the new habits that we are shaping, I think, and also shaping not a top down but a bottom up, because by the construction and building the environment that you live and that you read and you communicate with, we are basically starting to program how do you live and how do you behave in that space. So that's definitely fundamental. If we could make this change.
Because I think actually, when Claudia and I were speaking, and one thing I've actually noticed generally with Ecologic's work is it is scaling. So whereas at the start of your journey, we were as a community looking at this highly conceptually because there was a lot to still work out. And then obviously there was a huge amount of experimentation across the communities of practice that were working with this in terms of how do you create the materiality, what are the basic processes. But now, some of the projects that you've created recently, they are at scale. These are large things, and this isn't just the last 12 months, but the sort of the past few years of Ecologic Studio. It has been very much at the architectural scale. So those people that are sort of saying, where are the case studies for this? You have built a number, haven't you, in the Ecologic Studio?
Yeah, there has really been a scaling up in terms of project, and essentially there has also been a shift and an ongoing conversation with different stakeholders in trying to understand how it's really the architecture morphogenetically that can interact with the city and change the city or remetabolize some of the byproduct of the urban sphere. So it's not simply about applying technology, nature-based technologies, artificial intelligence to the built environment. Is really the way we design and the way we integrate this element in the built environment that can reshape the city. This is one of the key points that we try to discuss.
Yeah, very much. And thinking to your folio, I mean, one of the great challenges of working in this space is the degree of integration with the outside world. When Rachel and I were speaking a couple of sessions ago, she was saying that when she thinks about living cities, when she thinks about living architecture, she does think of it as an open system. But then even within that open system, you have to have the closed system. So she was talking about microbial reactors, because obviously there are some contexts in which you do have to have containment. But then again, when we think to nature and then sort of the ecosystems of the world, there are very similar analogies, and that you have, much of it is an open system, if not immediately, then certainly after a short while, at a certain point. But then, sorry, I'm just going to buzz Claudia back in. But then equally, there are, if you like, closed ecologies. There are ecologies that are very specific to, it could even be a particular tree. I mean, for example, if you were to take an oak tree, all the different oak trees in a forest, each of them will have a slightly different ecological community. Even one of the most mind-blowing things I read about microorganisms was that on the human, so diversified are our microorganisms on our body that even individual pores on your skin can have their own microecology that is different from the other pores. I mean, that's just, this is sort of head exploding stuff. How do you even understand that level of microbial diversity? So that is an area of sort of just again juxtaposition of the closed versus the open system. How do we navigate that? And I'm very much aware that sometimes for those that are new to this subject, it can be in some ways quite confusing as to why we wrestle with this problem as a community so much. But it's partly because of the fact that it is so incredibly complex in nature, and where we choose to make or not to make the interventions, where we choose to make a system open or not, is something that requires a huge amount of information that we are still very much in the process of actually trying to aggregate and trying to work out. So we haven't, as a community, yet got all of the answers that we need. So when we think about biofutures, we need to understand this is a work in progress, and we could be in a very different situation 10 years from now, because we will have so much more information, and therefore be able to make a lot more informed decisions.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about the scale and kind of challenging us with the question, what about the scale? Do we go to architectural? But actually to go to the micro scale, not to the macro, the city, but to the micro scale is also a great challenge, which opens up a different complexity. So, and this we work in the kind of in between the scales by designing the system, designing the system of relationship, which is programmed originally from the very much of the microscopic study of the process, and then you could be escalating it to the model of the city, to the model of the city fabric, which will be working in similar principles, but that won't be just the kind of the static model. That would be a dynamic process, like the organism for the implementation to the city. So yeah, the scale is also the challenge, and even the micro scale is a challenging topic.
Absolutely. And just for the benefit, although we've got Claudia dropping in and out, Maria and Claudia are really together, so there are certain, they can each basically cover one another's bases. For the benefit of those people that are not privy effectively to the sort of research that you're working with and that you see daily in your work, both as a researcher as an academic, share some of the sorts of projects that are going on in, for example, a synthetic landscape lab. Give the audience a sense of, for example, what kind of organisms are being integrated into architectural and built environment schema, how they are being integrated, what are the sort of problems that the community of researchers are seeking to solve using living design.
Yeah, but as we were speaking before, we are looking to architecture and to the design as a living system, and definitely we work in the close relationship with living microorganisms, co-designing and co-living with them. And we are working a lot with Claudia is back.
Hi.
So Claudia, I'm just giving some insights what we are actually working on in the lab, and also maybe you could catch up and continue with the ecologic studio. So yeah, I was saying that we are working a lot with the living organism, involving both in the process of designing, in the process of production, and in the performative experience as well. Both ecologic studio and synthetic landscape lab quite experienced in working with microalgae. If you know, this microorganism is highly performative and is capable to produce oxygen at the same time absorbing the carbon dioxide. And here talking about, for example, the algae, only in the performative sense in the architecture, but also in programming the gradient of color, in the programming of the circulation of the whole design system. And that's maybe one of the most developed aspects also in ecologic studio. Maybe Claudia, you want to catch up with giving some key projects that you like the most of ecologic studio for the implementation of microalgae.
Well, we have already discussed in the previous series the photosynthetic line that now has been developed, and we are reconnecting on this second level of experimentation, and therefore developing large scale 3D printing. We are also expanding on a new office space here in London, not yet secure, but where we want to establish a air lab, again, in collaboration with GSK. A preview will be showcased at the building center, but later the intention is to have a permanent one here in London in a larger space where we can experience the overall cycle in real life.
We've got, I was just going to quickly give a list, and if I've missed any out, so these are the things off the top of my head. I know that the research teams that you have worked with, that you've led, that you have co-created, have worked with. So we've got fungi, we've got bacteria, we've got algae, we've got ants and insects, we've got arachnids, we have
crystals, water,
crystals and water,
bees.
I forgot bees. Yes, bees. Essentially, I mean, slime mold. So definitely. Multiple types of organism, aren't there, that have been applied to multiple problems. And off the top of my head, I know among those problems, you have looked at solving ventilation issues with buildings. looking at how the microorganisms and the insects and so forth navigate that challenge, looking at optimization of systems, looking at biosensing, understanding the environment embedded detail, and then aggregating that data and basically using it to inform your biological decisions, sorry, your architectural decisions and your infrastructure decisions and all the decisions. So it's a huge area of research activity, isn't it, that you've got going on, because this is a multi-species ecosystem of research. How many researchers would you say you have worked with? I mean, I'm thinking not just to the students, but to the staff, to the people that have been involved in the lab. Claudia, the last 2 decades, ballpark number.
Yeah, a lot. But yeah, at the moment, actually, that's something that we don't count, but we have a very diverse group. We have not only in terms of species, but also in terms of human diversity. We, as you can see from here and also from the rest of our team, we have a lot of talented women and a very international team, aside from the diversity of microorganisms and form of non-human intelligence. We have also other form of diversity that are part of our team. Yeah, the number of people we have been working with is really high, and I think at the moment we are really looking into consolidating and also creating a more complex structure. Finally, let's say, implement the polycephalum at the level of the practice, which is one of the main challenge. And if you can see, I mean, I would want to say something unconventional, because anyway, Maria will cover all the philosophical part, because she is become better than me, so I can just go funky. No, but just to say something, I have noticed in many of the conferences in which I've been, in which, there have been women architects, office led by women, and as we are 3 women here, we can't ignore, the pink elephant in the room. So, and I have noticed that often practice led by women are very collaborative, and they have a much more collaborative structure. But what we are trying to implement here, it's also a collaborative structure which is a little bit more complex, and that try really to be inspired by research on collective intelligence. It's not easy also on the level of the structure of the practice and understanding how much of virtual relationship, physical relationship, mediator relationship we can have, and how we can work across multiple frameworks. But it's really something that both Marco, myself, and all the team, it's putting also a lot of effort in. And we are at the moment really trying also to, deploy some of the investment we receive in structuring a team that would allow us eventually to tackle larger projects in a more resilient manner. So that's one of the efforts we are also working on at the moment, and really follow up on this idea of practice-based research that is not necessarily my practice or Marco practice, but is a practice that is able to incorporate individuality while at the same time create a team. It might seem banal as a conversation, but it's actually not. Often there is the problem in architectural practice that when you scale up, you lose quality. How do you retain the characteristic of the individual without, losing the team? So these are all questions that we are facing at the moment. And I think many of the discussion we have been facing in the design method in terms of resilience, multiplicity, collectivity do apply also to the possibility to structure a practice of a different kind. So this is, I think, an important challenge at the moment.
I agree. I think that's critical. And, what I would say is that the journey of Ecologic Studio has been long, but what you are actually doing is you're building a new kind of practice from the roots up. You are now at the stage where you have enough information on not just how your own practice works, but how biologic and ecologic studios and businesses more generally can actually operate. I mean, for example, you know, if someone like me were to sit down and look at the operation, it is actually now possible to map out the revenue streams, to map out a lot of data in detail, because you have literally been compiling this over multiple, what are experiments, real world projects, in enough detail across enough time to have that information. And so we are now at this state when before, you know, you could not scale these kind of businesses because there simply wasn't the information. Now there is. And one thing I've noticed is that this is not one or two businesses and practices within this area that are literally sort of at that point of liftoff, but a number. And that is the biggest sort of qualitative change, if you like, commercially, is that, you know, this is now at the stage when you can sit down and you can say, this is the impact, this is what we need. But we could not have done this 20 years ago because, you know, we hadn't done the experiments. This community of practice and research hadn't done that. And so I think it's an incredibly exciting time.
But, and of course, the evolution of the technique has been incredible. I was talking the other day with a gallery in New Jersey, was inviting us to a solo exhibition, and they were discussing how students might participate and how they might participate in construction. I say, well, yes, maybe, but things have changed, you know, it's evolved so much. We have been working a lot in, you know, developing drawing that were almost impossible to actualize in this with the same type of digital and biological effort with which they were generated. So you would have a digital biological drawing, but no means of actualizing. But now the whole development of, you know, also techniques, not, I don't like to call it technology, but techniques of robotics and biotechnology allow us to really embed this element in the built environment and to have a much more fluid relationship between design method that are really experimental and actualized built environment. So this is a link that it's now possible also thanks to the development that we had in the last 10, 15 years.
Absolutely. I'm thinking here, one of the conversations we had earlier in the series was with Nancy Dines, and Nancy was saying that over Central St. Martin's, one of the challenges that she has had is some of her students asking the question, are the skills that I'm learning, are they, you know, learning how to produce and to apply biomaterials, are they going to have commercial applicability, or am I going to have to develop a wider folio that integrates much more traditional, you know, old ways of working? But speaking with you, I'm thinking all of our students need to be tuning into this conversation, because effectively the conclusion here is, yes, you should be doing this. You don't have to diversify, because there are opportunities now for you within studios that are very focused on this and that are at the point of expansion, and that have, you know, they have the use for your skills. Would you say that would you share that sentiment, Claudia? I mean, I certainly, when I think to your advice students.
I wanted to leave something to Maria to add on this, but or the question before, but yes, I definitely share this view. Although I need to say that also these students then need to be open-minded or having some lateral thinking, because if you propose a new practice, that's a new practice, and you need to contribute in some way to the development, because it's uncharted territory to a certain extent. Not totally uncharted, because it's 15 years that we are experimented on that, but there are some level of unchartedness. So, and there is still an expectation that you experiment in school and you go out and you just apply. And on one side, what the students feel this is constraining. On the other side is what also they expect or their family expect. And I think you never should stop experimenting, really, in a more structured manner. While you grow, you develop method for experimenting, integrating experimentation. But I think to be able to really tackle some of the challenge we nowadays facing, we need to prepare the student to never stop studying, in a way. That is actually a quote from a Pirandello theater show, but it's okay.
But also I would say,
so, but that's actually part of the game, apart from being a quote.
And what would you say?
I would say also the university probably should evolve now as a structure. Maybe I think that we are lucky to collaborate with the greatest institutes around the world, and which basically support the research. But I wouldn't say that this is the case globally around the world, that the university becomes a platform for the research, which might be applied to the practice. So I think that we need to bridge these two different concepts of studying and then working, studying and then, I don't know, resting. As I was saying also before, we do build a culture, and the studies is a part of this culture, the essential part of this culture.
Yeah, in our first conversation, we spoke, didn't we, quite at length about the culture of universities and the fact that some aspects of that needed to change. And I completely agree with you, Maria. I mean, I think the idea of, you know, study, then apply, study, then apply. And that is one of the strengths actually at Innsbruck, is that you have actually got already, you've developed a range of different scales of courses, different lengths of courses. So you can see that it would be an organic process for that to expand, such that it could be, you know, easy for, let's say, commercial practices and for those that are already in work to integrate this into their career evolution. And, you know, whether or not that is bespoke to bio and ecological approaches, or they're actually coming to this new.
If you think about it, on the other end, also some of the concept that we inherit from the first industrial revolution, they define this segregation between learning and working and holiday. The concept of holiday comes from the first industrial revolution, in which, you know, you had to work in a certain condition and then you had to take a break or evade that condition of the city. So if we talk about reconnection and reintegration, maybe this category also become obsolete of the way we live, the way we operate, the way we produce and research. It's a more, I see it as a more continuous realm rather than segregated environment that bear almost no relationship one with the other. And this is really a mental framework that is really important. If you want to innovate, it's not enough that you innovate with your drawing, with your material test. You need to understand how this innovation has social repercussion. And socially means also in the way the society is structured, how your life is structured, how you relate with your research, how you imagine yourself in relationship to your research, your feeling, and your everyday life. That is very important, without which you cannot change. You know, the society is an organism like we are. Cannot change my arm without changing the whole of myself. So I cannot change the way I design without changing the rest of the society, in my opinion.
I think that's a really good point. And, you know, that sort of, that theme of integration and of breaking down the boundaries. I mean, you know, what this conversation is speaking to is the fact that it's a universal need. There is, you know, the need to totally re-examine how we organize everything, including how we learn and how we work. Any more points to add on that, Maria, or shall I move on to our next question?
No, I think we've got that. We don't work. We party together with our spiders, 3 tons of algae, polycephalome.
No, you do have a lot of creatures in your studios, I must admit. There's always a lot of animals in there.
Absolutely. Claudia and also Giacomo really love spiders, and sometimes they pop up in the lab. So yeah, we have a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah. Actually, I should just say to the people that are watching that don't know the studio, another thing is that Claudia's children are often very involved. They are on the trips. They are in the background somewhere, and they've been learning about this stuff since they, well, practically born, haven't they? So it's integrating the generations as well, and not sort of dividing the boundary between your sort of your work and your life, because that's really the only way that you can integrate these new ways of working into your professional activities. So I wondered, we've talked a little bit about scaling, and that has been sort of, if you like, a major issue of debate in the series, because there are so many different perspectives on it. How do you see the sort of things that we're working on scaling, other than obviously imagine a world? So we've addressed the policy and we've addressed the funding issues. We don't have to worry about that. But now just think about the practicalities of how we scale this. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on how we enable people's homes around the world to integrate the sort of systems, the biological systems, the algae production systems? Another theme that we've had throughout the series, we've been talking about ways in which the home might integrate our research in order to address the critical problems. So the things that have popped up. So we have had Urban Fungarium. Rachel Horton-Kitchlew, she has designed a device that enables you to grow fungi in your home in a beautiful, very easy to look after way. So it would work at any size of home. And apparently she said it's much harder to kill fungi than it is a plant. So pretty much anyone could have one of these. We had Rachel, she offered the microbial reactor, among other things. Oh, and that was it. We had Richard Beckett. Richard Beckett he had the idea of, your home as a probiotic home that has the microbial environment to enhance your health and not hinder it. We had Fullgrown, who was speaking to growing your furniture in community projects, whereby, you grow your chairs, you grow your lamps because they curate trees. Thinking about your systems, the kind of systems you work on, how do you see those in the homes of the future and in the offices of the future? And what systems of production do you see? Do you see this being something that is very hands-on by the community, by the homeowner, or do you see something else?
Well, we have already integrated photobioreactor in the home environment. There is the Biobombola project that we have in our home. We had designed and produced a limited edition of 10 that are now distributed in various homes, and we are talking with a larger distributor to actually resell the Biobombola. The same type of photobioreactor has been integrated in various public space. Of course, when it's about the home, you imagine that the end user will participate in the gardening. In the case of office, it was integrated more in the research as part of the biofactory for Nestlé, or through intuitive interaction as in the playground in Warsaw. But for me, this is an example, and the question, it's not but I don't want to propose this as an absolute truth. It's an example. The photosynthetic line has been developing more than other line in terms of actualization for different reasons and chances. But also, I believe that really the shift from the machine for living to the living machine, or the living architecture, is the shift. Then multiple, a collective of architects and designers could propose different enablers that are integrated in this dynamic system and become part of it, and eventually change also accordingly to the community that interact with them, human and non-human. But the question is, again, I would like to reframe. Of course, the line we have worked on more and is more actualized is the synthetic line, and then we have intention to carry forward other lines, like the one with Zymol, the mycelium, the project with the Fusarium is just bought by the. We have developed project with UN on that, but the question is not really. It's just us encountering this organism and developing as a designer with who has a specific method to work with this organism, developing architectural interface that allow a dialogue between this organism and the user. But the essential aspect is the dialogue, whether it happens in the home. And I don't want to appear very philosophical, but for me, it's a much more actualized question. How design is able to create this dialogue. And I think, in my opinion, we should refrain as designer to propose our design solution as universal, but we should keep designing bespoke element and new type of interfaces. So we should keep open-minded. And I know that often branding, because come again from the same type of mentality, force us to brand one object, but I kind of refuse to do that. I would like to brand a method, the method of creating or creating architecture as interface between the human and the non-human. And it's just us, and we have developed a lot of technique, and we can now deploy that safely, that we can create this dialogue with microalgae. We are intending to invest on other type of dialogue in a different scale, both the scale of the household and the scale of the public space with other organisms. I think the next in line is, of course, the fungi. Right?
I think we just got a slight connection issue there with Claudia.
Will be universal. Oh, sorry, I think my connection was a bit buggy.
Yeah, your connection is in and out. Maybe if Maria takes over to speak about the fungi. Are you able to do that, Maria? Just because the connection is a little bit dodgy.
Maybe I wanted to add first. I don't know what Claudia exactly wanted to say about the fungi, but I will follow up. So I wanted to add also that Claudia is saying about the relation or the interface of communication with the different type of the species. And basically through this kind of communication, the kind of way to communicate, we create, well, we call it a pattern through which we create the relationship with the surrounding or with the non-human. And this pattern we basically define as aesthetics, following also Bateson. But basically this aesthetics, I think, is something fundamental for us to establish the aesthetical language, which helps us to communicate new type of architecture, new type of design to a person, to a human. And again, it's very intuitive. And I think that's kind of the step that we all need to establish, maybe besides creating the relationship with a specific species, with a specific spider or the microalgae, more creating the system of relationship, the pattern of relationship, the connection, the communication of us, catching up with that. So I don't know, Claudia, if you're here, what you were saying about the fungi, actually, I don't know, I couldn't hear that.
No, I was just saying that for me, and we've been discussing with Marco quite a lot, that the next in line in terms of actualization is surely in the fungi realm from the one of the cyanobacteria. Yeah.
So in terms of the vision that you have, so you're speaking here to a really critical aspect of design. You're speaking not to, if you like, the industrial methodology of design, which is to design the thing, and yes, to look at its interaction with the human, but not to look at that necessarily in a systemic way, where you are effectively curating the home, you're curating the environment, the systems of that, and so that it will passively, in effect, encourage positive behaviors. It will encourage the human to, and the homeowner, the office worker, to engage with the non-human world, to engage with biological ecological systems, but do so in a way that feels to them very natural. So it's very much in a sense of, if you think of the science of ergonomics, when it's done, it's performed at its best, is not something that the user of that design object or place they're not even conscious of it. But what the design has very specifically done is they've looked at the problem, as it were, in such detail, and then they've crafted what is effectively a systemic solution that enables the person to not just interact with the item, but to, in effect, bond with it. It's about the relationship between the person and the thing or the place. So this, you're speaking to systemic design, you're speaking to the designer and the architect and the planner, in effect, needing to have a very deep level of knowledge that would be effectively enabled through relationships with others, through the sort of teams you've been building at Ecologic Studio, where you've already spoken to the diversity of expertise there. And then with that, looking at the home, obviously the systems that you've already got. So you've already got the algae production systems. I will share some links for those that haven't seen them. Ecologic Studio have created devices, in effect, that you can use at an individual scale, or you can have as a systemic architectural system in your home or in your office or any other space that you have that is architectural and has the suitable conditions for growing, and that you effectively nurture, you engage with, but you can harvest, and that performs different tasks for you. You can eat the spirella that is grown, but there are other things that your work has addressed, things like cleaning the air. And obviously, if we look to this whole school, there are people that have looked at harvesting energy. They have looked at, a system of design that doesn't just solve one problem, but it solves a whole number of problems. So you've already envisaged that, you've built that, you've tested it, you've prototyped it, you've shown it, you're ready to scale in terms of some of these solutions for home growing, shall we say. And then what you're also saying is that although you want this process to be very innate, to feel natural to the people that are engaging with this, be they residents or workers or whatever they are, you want to create the opportunity for choice, because obviously everybody is different. Everybody is going to have different levels of engagement, different levels of interest, different amounts of time. So diversity of solution, is that the general consensus, you would say, of what you're looking at?
Well,
Yes,
I
you
would,
could say that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would also agree with that. And also, well, I think that all the discussion that we are also having, and you were mentioning also scalability, and when you were talking about the biobombolas or the processes, or the biobombolas which you're capable to keep in your place, then if you look to the different type of systems, like, I don't know, Hortus Pompidou, that like I never could pronounce full name of our project. Hortus Asta. Claudia will now remember that I cannot still pronounce that.
Axtaxanthin G.
Exactly. So there we were developing, like the performative system, which is basically the high resolution 3D printed structure, which is made of the recyclable PETG material, which is now hosting the microalgae like integrally within the porous structure of the sculpture itself. And basically the sculpture is capable to grow the biomass of algae, also capable to produce the oxygen and absorb the carbon dioxide. So here we are talking about the sculptural system, but which is still could be scalable to the larger piece. But again, I think that kind of here the aesthetics and the kind of the the way how do you communicate and how the performance of the existing piece are could be similar to the biobombolas, and I think that these systems are very much scalable, and the dialogue is could go from the micro to macro.
I was just thinking in terms of showcasing this to the world, when Rachel and I were talking, the idea of the bio circus came up, wherein you had a touring exhibition, for want of a better word, where the public were introduced to a number of the kind of concepts that we work with, but in a way that is entertaining, that really shows the wonder, that shows the excitement in what we're doing, that really conveys how extraordinary some of the sort of breakthroughs and achievements that are being made, right at the edge of this. But what I'm thinking here is, usually when we see these works exhibited, they are in an exhibition. They are put together with other very, very interesting ideas, but they're not necessarily presented as an integrated system, wherein you're actually getting a sense of, if you lived in a place that had all these different things going on, how that's going to feel. What's your day going to be? What are you going to do when you get up in the morning? What are you then going to do after that? How is this way of living going to affect you? And it struck me it'd be really great if we sort of had some kind of place, a space that's more than an article, that's more than a visual, but that actually shows that in a performative way, it could be it's a performance, it could be it's digital, it's virtual, or it is sort of in the circus. It is somewhere where all these things come together, and then you feel, well, this is what my biofuture would actually, you know, look like, and this is what I would be doing. What are the most integrated ways of actually presenting these various works and ideas that you have seen in your various travels around the world?
I think that's actually the idea that I think that's actually have been an idea that we were discussing also with Claudia and Marco some actually years before. I won't be mentioning the specific project, and I think we are envisioning it more as the material study, where different material systems are integrated and related, where we are creating a full metabolic cycle of, for example, waste or any matter, where you could be, again, growing food inside of your living capsule, when you could be recycling using different type of the plants or different type of the microalgae or myceliums as well, which are starting to biodegrade different type of pollutants and matter, and again produce you back the fruits or serve the information exchange, where you could be using different type of slime molds in order again to share the information and start to program, the shape, the form, and the networks of communication within the structure. So that's maybe the idea that I would go for, and would envision the scenario where we are not only talking about the communication of the human with some specific type of the microorganism, but when we are talking about the overall cycle where different agencies are becoming the part of the process, that's maybe would be the scenario I would propose to discuss, and take it not metaphysically, not take it digitally or as a diagram, but actually test the all the cycle of matter that we could recreate.
I'm just thinking there. So at University of Salford, for example, University of Salford has a number of works that are literally at the scale of the building, or even at the scale of the streets. The School of Built Environment at the University of Salford has, for example, a lab that has a house in it, a full house, scale of the house on the street. And they conduct various experiments in the house where they are effectively testing various new technologies, various new concepts. But then they've also got experiments that are at the scale of the landscape. They're at the built scale with multiple properties. And that effectively gives them the chance to, flush out the weaknesses, to flush out the strengths, but actually experientially, I've been...
Yes, but which kind of weaknesses? In a way, I think, in my opinion, we also need to reach actualization one step at a time. And exhibition, for example, like mutation creation at the Center Pompidou, for me, are essential way to actually rewire our neural network as human and start to approach certain type of question. Also from the aesthetic and the spatial point of view, in the context of our museum, which is a space that we experience and is part of our daily life, is not a fiction. On the other hand, I may be a little bit, I don't know this specific experiment you were talking about, but I'm skeptical of tests that are there to test, because they tend to become very numerical or very pragmatic, and also decontextualized. And while a museum is, the curator is good, and I think Marianne and Olivier, maybe Olivier is listening at some point, they are amazing, together also with Frederic, but I tend to work a lot with them because they work more on the biological exhibition of this series. They really create a cultural context that connect historical project with novel one and cutting edge research, and that's an environment that allows us to contextualize certain projects. Of course, it's not the place maybe where we wake up in the morning, unless there is a performance to which we sleep at the museum. But yeah, it's not the place maybe where we wake up in the morning, but it's a space where we can contextualize certain idea. On the other hand, I also think that the changes that we go through when we wake up in the morning I appreciate myself if they can also be gradual. And I introduce new daily practice one step at a time. Other might have other opinion, but I'm very much a person that considers slowness as a quality that has not been underlined enough, and often is not considered a quality in the current society. While I think it's important to think, you know, as a designer, we are often in a hurry to visualize the future, but I think we are already in a biofuture, much more than we were many years ago, as I started from the initial sentence. But the question is that just be aware of that and work on making the next step consistently. And for me, that's an harvest the capability of others to make these steps, be conscious of this step, and be willing to change society. And not simply because sometimes when we think about the too far future, it's stimulating, but on the other hand, it's a little bit like an evading where we actually are, and maybe not even recognizing some of the steps we have been able to make. So, so I'm very much for staying with the trouble, but also staying with the pleasure, both of them. So, and there is already a lot that we have achieved, and we need to not maybe rush too much towards the future, but understand where we are and how we make the next step so that really consistent change can happen. I might need to leave in few minutes, but yeah.
That's okay.
Cool.
And you know what I was thinking there, because you're the device that you've built for growing algae spirella at home is very much like Rachel Orton-Kitchelou's fungarium, in that you literally have a prototype now that you know, if made at scale, really anyone could go out, they could put in their home, they could make a very incremental change. It's not going to feel like their home is radically different. It's literally going to, you know, feel like a very small addition. They might add one thing, they might add two things, but that for them would be a change that would feel very natural, because it's not sort of a giant leap into a different reality. It's literally just slightly tweaking their existence today, and then the process of testing that is very organic, in that, you know, you would naturally see through that process who works well with it, who doesn't, and then it evolves over time, because obviously the concept is probably going to be modified, it's going to be hacked by those that use it. I was just actually thinking that for the urban fungarium, there's probably going to be people that will probably buy it and try and grow magic mushrooms or something, because that's the sort of thing that people do. They take an idea that was intended for one thing and then they apply it to another. But you know, those sort of events that evolve within the natural process of people using something, user testing effectively, are what then informs the development and help you understand what the real world scenario would be. Whereas, you know, the antithesis of that, you've got the sort of the kind of like the University of Bath and some of the other universities about Britain have got very Salford-like projects where they literally have experiments going on where they've built a sustainable home, and then people go and live in it for a set period of time, and they're using all of these very, you know, new to them types of gadgetry. But you could argue that in that scenario, the kind of guinea pig setup, they're not necessarily going to be behaving naturally. They're not necessarily going to, you know, respond as the mass populace would. So I think it is important to think about these different approaches. And I do like what you're saying about the integral change. And I see, certainly if we were thinking about how we might learn from kind of business and commerce more generally, that approach tends to work much, much better than if you try and, you know, have the sort of the wipe the canvas clean, the, you know, the sort of start from scratch approach. So we'll conclude with Claudia. I know you've got to head off now. I'm just seeing where we are for time, actually. We've been going on quite a long. Well, there are two questions, ladies, that you do have to ask before you go, because every contributor to this series is answering these questions and they're going to be compiled. So the first is, the year is 2050. as succinctly as you can, what does the biomaterialized world that you envisage look and feel like in 2050? Where have we got to by then?
I know what Claudia will answer.
Maria?
I know what Claudia will
yeah.
answer. One step at a time. We should go one step at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time. Maybe. Yeah, well, we are already in the, well, I was borrowing Marco answer will be soft, wet. Maybe there will be no smell and there will be odors, but maybe also collective. But I don't know if it's 2050. I struggle with these dates. For me, it's just now already. And you know, we have
So you've got the kind of the William Gibbs futurist. It's distributed.
I'm not in favor of or really long projection, but yeah, we could say that it's wet, soft, and somehow the air bubble we developed for COP 26, it's in a way envisioning that type of architecture that is soft, made 90% of air, 99% of air, bacteria, and water, and just a thin membrane of TPU, and try to embed really what and remetabolize what surrounds it, and really try to embed what an architecture of carbon neutrality can be. But yeah, I wouldn't put a date or an expiry date or an arrival date to that.
Okay. And Maria, what do you think?
I wouldn't also put the deadlines for us for that, but I would envision maybe the multi-species democratic city or environment or the society or polis now, which is involving now not only human inside of the city, but also all the non and inhuman agency and co-design together. That's what I would at least wish to imagine.
Just as you said that, actually, it just occurred to me, we do now have the data. Certainly, we have enough data to read plant signals to understand whether they are stressed or they're not stressed. We now know that Adam Adamatsky, he found obviously the fungi have at least 50 words that they speak to each other. So we're kind of at the stage of nearly decrypting what fungi is saying. Obviously, we have a fair idea of what the species that are quite similar to us, social creatures, we generally know whether they're happy or they're sad because we understand how to interpret their behavior. So I'm thinking your democratic multi-species city, we could have, whereas today we just tend to ask what the humans think about ideas, we could actually ask other species maybe within decades, because we certainly already have the systems that can read those signals and get an idea as to whether or not they might like an idea as much as we do. So I think that's quite a key point you made there. Your final question. Oh, sorry, Claudia.
Just to add one word to that, I think that the point is that we are like really forced to think in this way, because it's not that we are just failing the relation with the non-human. We are failing our own relation. We are failing our own democracy. We are failing our own way of living. So, and that's, I think, the first of all, why we need to think about that, not only for the different side, but also for our side.
For our own good.
But there is one note on that again brings me back to the present rather than to the bio-present rather than the future. We already understand fungi and we already understand microalgae. We just struggle to understand ourselves and our understanding of the world, in my opinion. So it's maybe a too anthropocentric expectation to decode the language of fungi as a decoding. But actually, if we devise design or way of interacting, we will discover that we already have that knowledge, because it's actually an ancestral knowledge that we have and that we have lost. Is a meta language. We might need to devise interfaces to augment that, but it's not a question of discover it in a there will be a hidden language. You know, that type of codified language is very human, very anthropological. But we have, as being the capability to interact with a meta words that doesn't necessarily speak that logical language. If we then want to translate it in something logical, I think we need to be aware that that is a translation, but is mainly through design. Not only, there is never an only, but it's mainly through design, in my opinion, that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe since Claudia has a problem, maybe just catch up on that. So maybe design could be that type of a language that we do translate the fungal electrical impulse. We are not translating the fungi to the human world or the human syntaxes. No, not trying to relate on that. But through the design, we might find the system for communication and creating the syntax of which will merge and let us to maybe co-live and create a common relationship and mutual relationship. I was trying to read Claudia's mind, and
yeah, you were using the art telepathy there.
just a bit through the polycephalon. We are connected.
Oh, I think if we were working with slime molds right now or with fungi, we'd have fewer connectivity issues than we've got with the Wi-Fi, haven't we? We're encountering the limitations of technology here, but we're getting through it. So the final question.
Next time, through the polycephalogram or something like that, we need to connect.
Yeah.
Not the Instagram.
Well, by series 2, we'll have to bring about the ecological systems online. So your final question, ladies. You have one wish each. So if a genie popped out of a magical lamp or a test tube or a petri dish in your lab and granted you, one wish for our biofutures, it could be anything at all, but it's something that helps to get things in the direction that you want them to go, what would it be?
I need to make a drawing. I can't express it with words, but actually the drawing would be mainly in trying to understand how we influence human understanding of reality. I think this is one of the main obstacles that we have, is really our capability to understand the world, but we can't speed up that either. But yeah, I will need to make a drawing to the gene. I don't know if he will take it very well, because it's probably used to different type of wishes, but what can you say?
Also, the fact that the gene would appear in our lab would absolutely change our perception of the lab and the fact what we want to have, I would be very happy. Actually, the fact that there is a gene, it would be enough for my wish. So I will just have that one.
But there's a parallel universe we hadn't yet discovered.
Which type of gene? Because I think it will not look like a gene. It will appear like a set of dots, a little bit misty, and it's.
We need to see it first. We see it. We observe. We talk with Claudia. We draw it, and then we could tell. Because
sorry, Jean. You look too much like a gene. We don't work with this very human gene. We want, come back in another shape.
Let's contact Melissa.
Please.
Wrong gene.
Wrong gene. 270s. Come on.
Yeah, I was thinking too Disney. We don't want Disney.
So first, let's
You've now got me thinking about my perceptions of genies.
Yeah. Before we release any wish, let's talk about the gene first.
Yeah, let's talk about the genie. I think that is a great project. I think first of all we have to ask your children, Claudia, what would the ecologic genie look like? Because I think they would give us some really good ideas. But I think that's brilliant. Only you ladies can come up with something so profound as questioning what the genie looks and is like. That is the perfect conclusion to series 1. So it's as ever a pleasure to catch up with you. We've had a technological nightmare through this. I had an earlier session today with someone else, technological nightmares, but we have finally made it. So it was really lovely to speak to you, and I'm so glad that you managed to join us today. and I look forward to catching up with you very soon.
That has been
Ciao.
a great pleasure. Thank you very much, Melissa. Next time through polycephalon, and all the fungus will be listening to us.
Yeah, you really raised the bar this time. My mind's now exploding with ideas for the next season.
And we don't
Looking
forget about
forward.
the gene. We don't forget about the gene, by the way.
The genie.
Yeah.
We're going to work on that.
Yeah, we have a lot of work
I made a
to
note.
do. Ciao.
Bye-bye for now.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye bye. Bye.